It is an honor to be here. It is always a sign of respect, of recognition, to be asked to speak at conferences and on one's research topics. But it is more so when that invitation comes from those who work in the field, those who have earned the respect of the people for whom they work. Not because they have all the theory right, and I'm not saying that you don't, but because you smell of the sheep you work with. In the small measure that I have interacted with you, some of you a few years ago for a similar, if smaller event, others in the preparation of this one, this is the impression I remain with, that you are at the coalface. And I'm sure that there is lots that I don't know. I am sure the realities you come with are complex and varied. I'm sure that there are differences of opinion on what to do and how to do it amongst you. Life is complex and difficult, but you are the workers in the vineyard. To quote Jesus, those of you who have been with me for quite a while, those of you who have persevered. So it is a privilege to kickstart and work with you during this time. Thank you for your trust. I hope we'll work together. And in terms of this moment of the conference and this keynote, my aims and intentions are simple. It is late on a Monday, and for a lot of you, for whom Sunday is the main day of work, this is technically Saturday, or something like that. So this session is for you. For you, as you are and with what you bring, with your own questions and with those of the people that you care for. There are a variety of themes that will help you over these days. My perception is that the organisers of the conference have worked hard and invested much to bring an exceptional array of speakers and experts at whose feet we shall sit to learn and whose insights we shall question and confection with our own, so as to enlarge our minds, to quote Newman, and move forward personally and as church. But this moment, after a long day's journey, aims to welcome and open that door and perhaps lay the foundations for the themes and dynamic that could unfold. To say the same differently, let's try to make space for the questions that we may come with, the ones that we're aware of, and the others underneath the surface, because some questions take time to name. Let me explain myself. I think questions take priority over answers at all levels, not only in time, but also in aims. I'm currently working on an aspect of Sandra Schneider's thought. Many of us know her thought, some of us have heard her speak. I love this quote. Have it up there yet? No. I love this quote. To start with the method is to determine a priori what questions may be asked. To start with the question is to root one's research in the open quest for truth. I'm working on a CD, and the guitars that we found in Brisbane, you will meet some of the musicians in a moment. The guitars we met is a U2 fan, you could tell. And I was reminded of one of Bono's well-known quotes. We thought we had the answers, it was the questions we had wrong. We're in a time of change. Father Stephen begun to announce for us. We're in a time where the questions are multiplying. And we need to be able to hold the questions and recognise that it's okay to ask questions. I was in a meeting about education. I work a lot with education in Brisbane, and a little bit here as well, or nationally. And I was reminded of that school classroom in which a group of kids, what would age 5, what year would that be anyway? A group of age 5 kids were in a classroom, and the teacher says to them, "What's small, brown and furry?" Silence. What's small, brown and furry? Silence. Finally, one little guy at the back puts up his hand and goes, "Well, I know the answer should be Jesus, but it sounds like a squirrel to me." Let's ask questions. Let's dare to not know the answer. Because let's dare to come and ask the silly ones as well as the valid ones. And thinking about that did bring me back to Evangelii Gaudium. One of the moments of that writing of Pope, I love it. Time is greater than space. Time is, and I'm aware I chose space in the title, but I'll come back to that. Time is greater than space. This principle enables us to work slowly but surely, without being obsessed with immediate results. It helps us patiently to endure difficult and adverse situations or inevitable changes in our plans. It invites us, and I love this bit, to accept the tension between fullness and limitation, and to give a priority to time. The time to work things out, the time to ask questions, the time to not know yet, because we don't know yet, and that's okay. The time to make space for our yearnings, the time to initiate processes rather than possessing spaces of completion where we already know what's going on, we already know the answers, and we control them. This is not because answers are not important, or because doubting and searching is more important than certitude, but rather because, firstly, if we do not allow our questions to surface, then the answers we get will not fit our lives, our searching. They remain small and feel weak or inadequate, so we feel threatened when anything we have not questioned comes along. Secondly, we don't need to fear. We can trust the one who called us, and not the one who has the answers, that's a bit superficial, the one who will aid us in finding them and who will work in and through the grey areas of life, who dived into our humanity in all its beauty and pain. In your weakness I am strong, resonated in my mind as I sought to put words to this intuition, or rather conviction. So it is the main aim of this session, to make space for our yearnings. What do we yearn for? What do I long for? What do I wish could happen, had happened, would happen? Where is the spirit moving in us that we would not stifle? And this I shall do, or attempt to do a little bit, through words and music, as you've heard. I'm not sure I'll have a song to respond to every single keynote, but we will work together through words and music. The organisers invited me to do this because this is how I approach theology and spirituality, my own attempt to nurture and form people in their own faith. Everything I attempt as a missionary in the formation work of the faculty I belong to is coloured more and more by, and I had written my own love for and attempt to make music, but I changed it because love is an overused word. It is marked by the visceral place music has in my Irish gut. Because it is one way in which we Irish, and not only us Irish, and there's a lot of Irish blood in this country, it is one way in which we experience life, and we make sense of life. Only one, but it is one way. So music and the conviction that the arts, our attempt to experience life to the full and express its beauty and its challenges, open spaces to make sense of our faith, our lives in Christ, in a way that words alone cannot. And perhaps we're never meant to. Even before the history of Western thought framed reason, or rather, a narrow understanding of rationality as the highest, at times only way of making sense of things. There are ways of making sense, of meaning-making, of all we have lived and will lived, that is broader than reason. We used to define human beings as rational, but it is closer to the truth to call us symbolic beings. We make sense of our lives in many ways. We have different patterns of awareness, patterns of consciousness. And music, to quote George Steiner in that beautiful book of 1986, Real Presences, in which he tackles the way art opens a space to touch the divine. Music, he says, has long been and continues to be the unwritten theology of those who lack reject any formal creed. It is one way that people make sense of life. And we need to find them, for ourselves and for those who come to us for help. We are tasked with making sense of our faith, our lives, our yearnings for ourselves and for those with whom we are entrusted. I was reading a book by the Abbot Glenstall, well, ex-Abbot or past Abbot, Mark Hedderman, the other day. And he was saying he describes his existence as a philosopher as a disease. He says the disease that those of us have who need to make sense of the world that we see. It's an interesting way. I stand up and I look out the window and I cannot not make sense of the world that I see. But we cannot not make sense of the faith that we have. We cannot not. It's a call. It happens. We seek it. We have to seek it. And we seek it for ourselves and we seek it for others. And art, music, poetry sometimes helps us to do just that. As I was preparing, I came across this beautiful poem again of Denise Levertov, and I'm just going to read it. I'm aware that we can't really at this moment, it's not the time to break into groups and sessions and have a bit of space, so I'm going to confection my words with music and a little bit of poetry, because it opens perspectives, I think, that phrases don't. But I love this poem, and again, it's about questions. Just when you seem to yourself nothing but a flimsy web of questions, you are given the questions of others to hold in the emptiness of your hands. Songbird eggs that can still hatch if you keep them warm. Butterflies opening and closing themselves in your cupped hands, trusting you not to injure their scintillant fur, their dust. You are given the questions of others as if they were answers. I'm going to open a musical space that I think will help move the theme along, and there's two reasons. A song that I'm going to sing is called Every Moving Life. And there's two inspiration points. Those of us who are trained in hermeneutics know that where a song comes from is not in any way the whole picture. But it may be helpful, at least it tells you why I choose the song, whatever about what it says to you. Two reasons had this song emerging in my brain again and again as I prepared in the past few weeks and indeed month. This song emerged after an experience of what I would call ministerial exhaustion. You know those moments when you have worked so hard and you land and you think, I don't know, God's name, my name, anybody else like it? I am so tired. And I found myself in the chapel looking at a crucifix, and the beginning of this emerged. It finished, the song finished in the light of the thought of one of the theologians I'm going to mention a little bit, who helped me make sense of what was happening in that space, and often what happens to me through music. So I just invite you to listen. If you pick it up, feel free to sing along. And perhaps we could just welcome, I have two amazing musicians this evening who have come to give us a hand this evening and in our morning prayer. Alan, who's from Mexico and is helping me produce the next CD. Alan, do you want to come up? And Macaulay, who is a past student of ACU, and I found playing piano in the chapel at Brisbane, and we have been musical partners ever since. So. Because I am leaving words in music, it will probably happen by itself. I'm just going to suggest we use the music as a space and think into it and pray into it. It won't be a lack of appreciation to not clap afterwards. Sometimes there's a question around whether we should. So just let's pray this. Most of them are prayer songs. I'm going to use, so let's just open the space and enjoy. After the grain of wheat has died, after loving you with every living breath, every moving light proclaims your name. After all is said and done, 'tis in losing you have won, 'tis in giving we receive, in being broken we receive your name. Sometimes, even despite ourselves, we touch God's glory or are touched by God's glory. Even as we're broken. It is Christianity's strongest suit. That even in suffering, in brokenness, in giving, in sin, through evil, somehow God can reach and touch us, and an encounter with God can happen. God is not untouched by our human darkness and our light. The other inspiration point that I was talking about underlying this song is the thought of 20th century theologian Hans Urs von Balthasar and his intuition that beauty was the forgotten gem of theological thought. And he called that beauty glory. The glory of the incarnated Christ, the Johannine incarnated, crucified, risen Jesus, all at the same time. That space, place, and person in whom we sense God's glory. And it was one of his greatest insights, just that. That in all its journeying through history, theology, somewhere along the line, had continued to remember that God is truth and formulating doctrines, continued to remember that God is good and exhorting us to ethical goodness, but had somehow forgotten that God is beautiful, had lost or forgotten that insight. Beauty is the disinterested one, without which the ancient world refused to understand itself. And yet, we have bidden farewell. And in a world without beauty, in a world which is not perhaps totally without beauty, but which can no longer see it, in such a world, the good also loses its attractiveness, the self-evidence of why it must be carried out. To say it, I was all Irish in preparing this. As Oscar Wilde, Irish irreverent truth at his best, once said to a journalist, talking of a city whose name I shall not reveal, I wonder your criminals don't plead the ugliness of your city as an excuse for their crimes. Are we not often in that place? Are not the people we minister to not often in that place, longing for beauty, longing for something to draw them? Reasons and expectations are not enough. What do they yearn for? What do I yearn for? Deep calls to deep. I'll help them discover that if I'm capable of owning my own. I came across a poem recently by a Jewish poet, who I think is from Melbourne, definitely lives here, Lisa Jacobson. And it is a poem that makes me yearn. There are stones that sing. The churches are almost empty or sold, as if they've reached their tipping point, and from the pulpits, God slid out. And all that fanciful gold leaf on heaven's floor was incinerated by our telescopes, whose lenses caught it in the scope, and bits of tattered gold fell down. That phrase moves me. Actually, it shakes me. It awakens yearnings in me to catch God as he falls, to present God, to wonder if God was ever meant to be up there in the first place. I'm not sure. I suppose implicit to all that I'm saying, and to a lot of the work, is the desire to present art and beauty as a way of accessing faith and even Christ. A big claim, I know, but it is a dimension that is re-entering into theological and spirituality, theological thought and spirituality. And not just music, all across the board, scripture studies, imagination, creativity, the human capacity and need to play, even sport. And for Australia, this one is going to be important. The areas that awaken our thought. A convergence of strands, or rather constellation of insights that reflect the spirit at work in the world, trying to rectify the wrongs of our various forms of narrowness and stretching us to wider and deeper spaces in our own self-understanding and that of God. And I think it has a few things to offer us. I think it will give us, firstly, a way of accessing our own relationship with God. Secondly, a way of listening to the world and perhaps sensing where God is at work in them, beyond the realms of what we know. And thirdly, even a way to help them access their faith. Jacobson continues, I've heard that M, so in French, is the name of a wooden chip, very exposed and vulnerable, that violin makers insert into the bodies of their instruments to further enhance the sound. So maybe that's where God lives now. If you ask a priest, he'll point up. If you ask blackfellas, they'll point down to stones that sing and rivers vibrating underground. Beautiful. Now, I don't think many of the priests that I know, in all fairness, would point upwards, but there's a point being made here. It's a paradigm we have worked within for a while, and that needs to shift. Where is God now, and how can we find him? How do we access God? Stones, nature, art, music have the potential to interrupt us with an experience of God. And this is one of my favorite definitions of revelation. Interruption. Even Maeve writes about it, but it's a term that he drew in turn from German theologian John Baptist Metz. Revelation is interruption. God interrupts time, appears when we least expect, and in places and spaces we were unaware that God was going to appear. God has always appeared. He interrupted Mary, he even interrupted Jesus in a way, in a his life unfolded. He interrupts us. Art can interrupt us and allow God to enter in different ways. Once again, George Steiner. When we touch something, or when something of art and music and spaces and places or architecture, something of beauty touches us, it transforms us. It enters in. The shorthand image is that of the Annunciation, a terrible beauty or gravity breaking into the small house of our cautionary being, and the house is no longer habitable in quite the same way as it was before. And we're lucky when we are interrupted in this way. We're lucky when our life suddenly shifts, the floor beneath our feet opens, and we are before the abyss. Because it's a strange life. It's a strange and beautiful life. It's a strange life. Are you all right? Sorry, maybe hard to say till you say goodbye. Take your time. You gotta slow right down to get things right. Be yourself. You're the only one can work that out. No one in 100,000 years has ever looked like you. No one in this universe can do the things that you might do. One life gone by, extra time. Heartbeat, hold me near. Close your eyes. You can see what's true best when it's dark. Search inside. Be one of the few, know what they want. Life is way too real to not imagine how it's meant to be. Life is way too short to waste on anything except your dreams. Strange life, we try to walk in style. Beat, help me feel. Take your time. You gotta slow things down to get them right. Come yourself. Ain't no one but you can work that out. It's a strange life. Are you all right? Sorry, maybe hard to say till you try good. strange life. It's a strange life. It's a strange life. And we find beauty in the midst of its mess and its strangeness. A beauty that can handle our yearnings, our life experiences, our questions, doubts, joys, pains, and passions. Holy, glory. Jesus, the humanity of God in human form, as the ultimate and foundational embodiment of the beauty that God is. And I was thinking we do well to remember that and then stay in touch with that life, the life, work, sufferings, joys, laughter, and tears of that God-man. I'd like to present perhaps a final piece of music that gathers what I am trying to say. And I've picked this piece of music for two reasons. Those of you I've worked with before may recognize it. It is a song that for me gathers everything that I want to say about the arts and music giving us access to an experience of Christ. But it's also a song that picks up the key reading that is at the heart of your theme, and that we read time and time again as we were listening. I'm the vine, you're the branches. In me, you can give fruit, and outside of me, you can do nothing outside of me. Those of you who have heard me speak before about music, and there are a few in the room, not many, will know that there is a truth of faith that I understand to be at the heart of what's happening when we talk about our lives, but also when we talk about music, that I come back to time and time again. And it's that truth of faith that we think points us up, but actually points down. The core challenge at the heart of Lisa Jacobson's poem was the one of where do we look to find God? We were taught that the humanity of Jesus, after death, resurrection, and ascension went upwards. And our cosmological imagination has very often looked upwards to find God, but we know that that's not true. We know that our world is no longer the way the biblical world understood it, three tiers, and at the top you've got Jesus. We know that somewhere the presence of God, the presence of Jesus at the right hand of the Father, isn't up and out there, but maybe down and under, who knows, or within. So the body of Christ, the vine and the branches, the ascension of Jesus, and the reality of the God within whom we live, move, and our being, are all one. This song tries to address that. It tries to touch your theme, and it speaks of what music can do beyond the words. So as you listen, I'd invite you to think about that, and to think there's one image here of the Gospel of John that is, if you like, colors the back of it, and again speaks of a beauty that knows about wounds. And it's the image of Thomas and Jesus. I think Thomas gets a hard deal. I don't know if there's any Thomases in the room, but I think when he gets called doubting Thomas, I think it's unfair. And the biblical scholars can challenge me afterwards. But I personally like the fact that when everybody else was outside of the room and he came in, he went, no, unless I. Couldn't Thomas be the sensitive one? Couldn't Thomas be the stubborn one who won't stop until his particular question gets answered? His particular question. And thanks to Thomas, we have that image of put your hand in my side. We have that. We wouldn't have had it had he not stood his ground, had he been a better boy. I'm just like, we wouldn't have had it. This song tries to touch that part of us that wants the intimacy, that wants the experience, that wants the more, that we know that we need. And as time changes, we know that the people that we're ministering ministry to also meet. After this, I'll come back to one of the last, and we will finish up, one of the last words, just briefly, in your title, Belonging, because for me it's linked to this. But let's listen to the music loud to open us, and then we'll bring this to a close. And again, just origin doesn't always explain, but the title of this song is Dancing in Our Minds. And the title was born of a very specific moment for me. I was sitting in a conference, a theological conference, a very good theological conference, I might say. Amazing people on the continent, let nobody feel alluded to. It was in Europe. I was sitting there, it was a fundamental theology conference, and people were presenting their papers, and I just thought, and they were good papers. And I was just thinking of the world that I was trying to, because I was moving from ministry into academics, if you like. And I just thought, we're dancing in our minds. Not because we don't need to, and don't get me, I'm not playing down. We need solid words and we need academic research at its best. But if we're not careful, we can stay there. And how do we bridge it out? And what can words do and what can't they do? And both questions are necessary. What can they do and what can't they do? And therefore, what are the other gifts and resources that we have through which the word, who is someone, and not an idea, can also reach and touch us. Too high for you guys, is it okay? And the world is alive with she had a broken wrist for the past 4 months. It's fine now, but
that's the Irish coming out. Stop this.
I could have that. Thank you for calling. That's an English comment. So what we're going to do, there is one verse, so when the music comes down, I'll sing the verse and you can learn it as we go along. But just let's start, I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of music, and I'm going to name all the dioceses that are here, okay? I'm not asking you to come forward, I'm going to name them all first. Then we'll sing, and as we sing, I invite you, they're going to bring the water and empty it into our font. A beautiful symbol of our coming together in our work these days. But let me just name them. Let's have a bit of background music as we name them. So we come here from Adelaide, Darwin, Camper and Gogar, Port Pirie, Brisbane, Cairns, Rockhampton, Toowoomba, Melbourne, Ballarat, Sale, Sandhurst, Perth, Geraldton, Sydney, Armidale, Bathurst, Broken Bay, Maitland, Newcastle, Wilcania Forbes, Wollongong, Hobart, Townsville, Broome, Lismore, Parramatta, Wagga Wagga, Bunbury, New Zealand, Auckland, Christchurch, Wellington.
Oh,
God's hands the rest of this conference. Amen.